Okay, I want to say good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon. Good lunch. I hope it's not hard to stay awake. So I'm going to make a recording of this session now. As you know, this term is coming to a close, and after today, there will just be one more tutorial, and that would be the end of this course. So for what is going to happen today is I'm going to talk a bit about VISTA in a bit more detail. And next week, in the next tutorial, we are going to have a little quiz on basically things that we covered today and last week and the week before. Right? So anything up to today is mainly what we've been talking about since Chris Lee took over. I won't quiz you on anything to do with those days, but today and last week and the week before. So things on IRS, interest rate swaps, things on VISTA, on counterparty risk, on mark-to-market. So next week we are going to have a quiz on this stuff. And I'm going to also, I want to share with you some other interesting case studies on mark-to-market. I'll tell you a bit about hedge accounting as well, but those topics will not be part of the quiz. So next time you come, I think right at the start, we'll do the quiz. Now, just by way of logistics, I do want to let you know that I sent you guys an email this morning. Did you see that? So this should be in all of your inboxes. This is regarding the quiz for tomorrow for Morgan Stanley and General Motors. You will need to bring along an FX option calculator of some sort. I provided one in my email, which I also uploaded to Blog. So you can use that one, or you can use any other one of your choice, but you will need to have access to the internet or tablet or laptop or something for the second part. So it's going to be like last time. So we have an individual part, and we'll have a group part. Okay. So for those of you who are doing the presentations, just to protect you better, in case things don't work, if you can kindly send me a copy, and I share that with Chris Lee, so you don't have to send it to him. I mean, you can if you want. And then the final quiz is like what I said. So for you guys, next Friday, please don't talk to the other tutorials regarding the questions. They're going to be different anyway. All right. And it benefits nobody. It doesn't benefit for the person telling, and it doesn't benefit the person receiving the information. Okay. But the quiz will be in a multiple choice format next Friday, when we meet here for about 20 minutes. So please make sure you bring along a pencil and eraser. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah? All right. Now, so where are we on our roadmap? So you are already
here. So we went from here, and we've gone for the last 10 weeks, basically all the way like this, and now you are here. And so what we talked about here, and then today here, so on interest rate swaps and mark-to-market, and then is the last week or last time, and then today. So the quiz is not really very hard, but I have to keep away those 5 points. This is how we do it. Okay. Now, let me just recap for you. So for Chris Lee, all the paperwork has already been given out. So you have all the cases, and you can even read them online, but you cannot download these, read them. And this is the sequence. I'm sure you know that very well. Is there anyone from A1 or A2? And then B5 and 6. Okay, we look forward to that. What I want to do today is to talk at a deeper level regarding the visitor documentation. Now, I want to just kind of recap on, there are a lot of things that bankers worry about, but let me name 3. And I'm talking just about, the derivative world. The first thing they worry about is what I would call individual mark-to-market swings. And the second thing is what I would call maybe aggregated. Aggregated just means you add them all together. So aggregated, aggregation. Aggregated mark-to-market swings. And the third thing that I can think of is what I would call collateral damage. Now, I will explain what these are momentarily, but the first 2 we have kind of covered last week. It's just that I did not express it this way, but let me just refresh your memory what I mean by individual mark-to-market swings. So if you look at, and we were using the example of someone like General Electric, and let's say General Electric has a lot of derivative transactions with JP Morgan. So here they have a client-banker relationship, and there can be hundreds, thousands of transactions between the 2 parties just in derivatives alone. Now, here I have a very simplified example. I pretend there are only 6 transactions between the 2 parties, and so these are mark-to-markets from JP Morgan's point of view. So in transaction A, so this can be a swap, it can be a forward, it can be an option, it can be anything. In transaction A, JP Morgan is winning 2 million in on the mark-to-market. And transaction B, JP Morgan losing 1 million. That actually means General Electric is winning. Here, General Electric is winning. Here, JP Morgan is making 2.5 million, 3 million. And here, JP Morgan losing 4 million.
Is everyone okay with that? Yeah, so some transactions, if you are JP Morgan Bank, you are making money. Some you are losing money. It's very common. Now, just imagine if overnight GE goes bankrupt. What happens? And I've written that down on the right hand side. GE goes bankrupt. Now, what GE can do is they still have the right to receive on the transactions that they are winning on. So B, GE is winning on B because it's a mark to market from JP Morgan's point of view. So they're winning on this one, 1 million, 2 million, 6 million. So contractually, General Electric can actually ask JP Morgan to make $6 million of payments. And then for the money that JP Morgan is winning on, which is this one, and this one, and this one, now you add them up, they come to $7.5 million. I say here, JP Morgan needs to join the queue and claim. So basically, you have to call up their lawyers. That's how it works. Now, we went through this last time, if you remember. And you think that maybe it doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't make sense. But classical contract law is like that. It's for rather simple things. I think it is not able to handle the complexities that are confronting bankers when they are dealing with big organizations with 47 different subsidiaries and 3,000 transactions. So what do you do? So they came up with the idea, well, why don't we use this netting? This is not something that comes naturally to contract lawyers. But the netting will solve this problem. Because if we net them all up, there is only one number, $1.5 million. So suddenly, in fact, JP Morgan is still winning, but now they only need to get $1.5 million from GE instead of $7.5 million. So that would, I guess, reduce your anxiety a little bit on individual market swings, mark-to-market swings. Everyone is okay? Just net them out. So what you own them and what they own you will offset each other. Now, the problem with that is that although this number is now smaller, it is. So today it is $1.5 million, but we don't know what it'll be tomorrow or the day after. So we come to problem number 2, which is aggregated mark-to-market swings. So even when you have just one number, that number can still go up and down. And, you know, when you are talking big amounts, it can fluctuate substantially. And especially in the derivative world, when you have something which is, you know, big amounts or very long dated, then because of the duration effect, something that lasts for 30 years, or something which has a high degree of leverage, or when it might involve some exotic derivatives. Now, all of these things can make the mark-to-market swing in quite a volatile manner, even when you add them all up, even when you do. So bankers are worried about that, which is problem number 2. Even the aggregated mark-to-market, you know, can swing substantially. So they try to solve that problem
with something called the credit support annex. Now we did talk about this last time, remember? Yeah. So I'm just refreshing your memory. So credit support annex, or CSA, is actually not compulsory. It's optional, but I think 8 times out of 10 these days, when people are negotiating ISDAs, they will also negotiate on this. Okay, now with the CSA, there are 2 very important parameters. In fact, actually there are 3, but I didn't tell you about the other one last time, which is called the independent amount. The other one is the threshold amount, and then the minimum transfer amount. Just to refresh your memory, so let's say GE and JP Morgan, they sign an ISDA together with the CSA, and in the CSA they negotiated the threshold will be $1 million and the minimum transfer amount will be 0.75 million. These numbers can be anything you want. They can be any number, that as long as the other party agrees with it, they can be anything. And I will discuss with you another example of what you can do with just 2 simple numbers. But let's just say for now, it is 1 million for the threshold and 0.75 for the minimum transfer. Now, so now I look at all the transactions that these 2 parties have, and I add them all up. I add up all the mark-to-markets and say it looks like this. So from GE's point of view now, so they started by making money, but then after a while they started losing money. And what happens is once you cross over this threshold line, $1 million, people are going to chase you on the difference. For example, so here I've got, now I'm still just recapping, refreshing your memory of what we talked about last time. So let's say you start and GE has a mark-to-market of $0.9 million. Now this is less than the threshold. And then the next day, their mark-to-market is minus 1.2. So that means your mark-to-market and threshold gap is 0.2. Everything is okay with that because your threshold is 1 million. Like I said, it doesn't have to be, but in this case it is. So you have a gap of 0.2. Now, in theory, you should pay that gap to the other party. But because the gap is less than the minimum transfer amount, you don't have to pay anything. And then let's say on day 2, so things got a little bit worse. So now it's 1.5. So now there is a gap of 0.5. Because that is the difference between 1.5 and 1. And does GE need to pay anything to JP Morgan? Not yet, right? Why? Yeah, it's less than the minimum transfer. Now, okay, so things just keep getting worse and worse. In English, we say things are going south. South means they're going downhill. South is not a good direction, okay? So things are going south, and now they are losing 1.8. So now the gap is 0.8. So this time, JP Morgan will pick up the phone and ask GE, excuse me, do you mind to pay me $0.8 million, either in cash or something very liquid like treasury bills? So the total paid, that is this column here, the total amount paid so far is 0.8. So now things keep going south. Things are not going well for GE Capital. And now the mark-to-market is minus 1.9, so the gap is now 0.9. Now, at this juncture, what GE should do is to pay an additional 0.1. Will they actually do that? No, they won't, because it's too small. So JP Morgan will just hang on to it because it's less than the 0.5, okay? So every time there is a transfer of money, it needs to be more than, 0.75, okay? So the day after, oh my God, it gets worse. So now they're losing 2.2, which is 1.2 million over the threshold. So you would think that, all right, well, then they need to pay another 0.4 because they have paid 0.8. If they pay another 0.4, that makes it 1.2. Do they need to do that? No, they don't. Okay. So they will just, so you can think of the minimum transfer amount is almost like an operational parameter. It's basically the two companies saying, look, if it is less than something, let's not bother. Otherwise, we're going to be on the phone every day. And sometimes they are. And on day number 6, shit, things are really bad. Okay? So now the mark-to-market is minus 3.4. So now the gap is 2.4, which means that since they already had 0.8 million in JP Morgan's account, they would need to pay 1.6. This time they will do it, and they need to. So the total payments now come to, can you read that? Now come to 2.4 million. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah? Let's imagine on day 7, things actually improved a little bit. So now the mark-to-market is minus 3, not minus 3.4. So strictly speaking, the gap, the mark-to-market to threshold gap is 2 million. So they only need to put 2 million in JP Morgan's account. Well, they have 2.4. So they can get back. They can now get back 0.4 million. But they won't get that money. What's the reason for that? Because it's less than the minimum transfer, so they don't bother each other. Now, if, and I stop here, on day number 8, market improves again. So now they're still losing, but they're losing less. So now it's $2.5 million negative market. So the gap is 1.5. So they should have this amount of money or collateral in JP Morgan's account. Well, it looks like they have too much. So JP Morgan will need to pay them back 0.9 to bring the total collateral back to 1.5 in the other person's account. Is everyone okay with that? Now, if you understand this, if you follow me so far, actually, this is something that you can do in a spreadsheet, I think, within 10 minutes. It's all rule-based, it's mechanical, and it is useful as well. Okay. Now that is on CSA, which will help solve this problem of your aggregated mark-to-market swing, so you don't have exposure, even if the mark-to-market, the total mark-to-market, when you add them up, even when that is a big number. Now, I now want to come to the third element, which is what I call collateral damage. You're not going to find this in textbook. It's just my description. Okay. Before I come to this, I do want to just show you what an ISDA agreement actually looks like. Because it's all very well to talk about these things in abstract, but I should show you what it looks like. Now, for a derivative contract to be valid, there are 5 elements to it normally. Okay, there is what we call the master agreement. There has been some revisions, so now there are 4 versions. So people normally will just use the latest one. There's master agreement. There is the schedule to the master agreement. There are ISDA definitions. There is CSA. And finally, there is a confirmation itself. Now, let me show you all these things so you get an idea what the hell I'm talking about. Before I even show you these, let me, this has nothing to do with ISDA, okay, but it's a good place to start. What is that? Now, this is a tenancy agreement, or you can call it a rental contract if you want. This is a standard legally binding document that you find in Hong Kong. What are you guys are renting out there, or you have your own apartment? If you do, that's a good thing. If you don't, chances are you have seen one of these, or maybe you even signed one of these. Now, the terms here are pretty boring, pretty standard. They're not in favor of either parties. Just talking about simple things like what the landlord should do, what the tenant should do, tenant should do this, do that. You normally don't bother changing any of this. I mean, you can if you really want to. For example, if the tenant shall fail to pay the rent within 7 days from the due date, maybe every month, the landlord shall have the right to institute appropriate action. Now, you could, if you really want to, change this 7 to about 5. You can if you want, if the other party is okay with that. But normally you don't change anything. You just put in the date, and then the 2 parties, and then you just sign at the end. You just sign here, and then you sign there, and then your ID card and the date and so on. There is another part called a schedule. Now, this one is a bit more interesting. This one has input that are related specifically to these 2 parties. So where the property is, who is the owner, and their telephone number, who's the tenant, and so on. Now, these are the commercial terms, like the from when to when, how much rent do you pay, what is the deposit, and who's going to pay the rates, and the government rents, the management fees. Is there a rent-free period, break clause, and other stuff? Now, this is what they call the schedule. Now, I want to show you this because ISDA is based on a similar idea. And when you see that, you're going to understand that a lot better. Okay? So let me show you. So just now I told you there are 5 elements to it, these 5. I'm going to show you this one first. So there is the master agreement. looks like this. This is a real, now, to be honest, it's not the most exciting thing I've ever read. Actually, it's quite boring. But this is the master agreement between, this is a real document between Comerica Bank and a company called Rackspace US Inc. So for our example, you would probably put JP Morgan and GE Capital, okay? So you got to be quite precise who you are dealing with. And it's got all kinds of legal stuff that people normally would not bother changing. Pages and pages of these standard legal terms. And you normally would just leave these alone because the ISDA community have done a lot of work over the years to make sure that it is robust. And what you do is that close your eyes if you're feeling dizzy, because I'm feeling a bit dizzy. But I need to look at it. Okay, so you come down here and you can see that there's somebody signing. So it has to be someone who is authorized to sign for the bank, someone who is authorized to sign for the company. So typically it is the chief risk officer or the CFO, chief financial officer, will be signing this when they are authorized to do so. Now that is the master agreement. So like I said, you don't really change these things. You just let them, just leave them as they are. I'll show you the document number 2. So schedule, just like the schedule you saw a moment ago on the rental contract. So there's a schedule to the ISDA agreement, and the schedule looks like this. The font is a bit different, but it doesn't matter. Now, so the schedule to the master agreement, so I guess you're going to put JP Morgan here. And you're going to put the client here, which will be GE Capital. Now, the schedule has 5 sections, and is by far the most important document of here. So part 1 is called termination provisions. I will explain what these things are. So part 1 is termination provisions. Part 2 is called tax representation. This is all in your notes. Part 3 is called agreement to deliver documents. I want to talk about this one and the first one in some detail. The other ones are not so interesting. So part 2, tax, you're just telling the other party what tax status do you have. Are you a US corporation? Are you incorporated in the Cayman Islands, in Hong Kong, or wherever? So part 3, agreement to deliver documents. Part 4, miscellaneous, like your address and stuff like that. Your offices, which office are you using? Governing law, I will talk about that in a moment. And then part 5, other provisions. And don't worry too much about that. Okay. Now that is the schedule. So I now want to show you what the definitions look like. And here is one example. Now they do that by asset class. So these is the definitions for credit derivative. So they have a set of definitions for equity derivative, another set for interest rate derivative, another set for FX, and I think another set for commodity derivatives. These are the main asset classes. So I just show you credit derivative, but I think it's enough. Now, this one, you don't change anything. You are basically agreeing with the other party. Okay, these are the rules of the game, and we're happy to use it. What's inside? So first of all, there are 90 pages of definitions, like what is an effective, what is a trading, what is a grace period, what is a buyer, what is a seller, what is a reference entity, fixed rate payer, floating rate payer, what is the meaning of settlement, credit event notice, and so on and so forth. And you can imagine this goes on and on and on. Okay, so pages and pages of definitions. It is like, you know, if I'm going to play chess with you, we don't have to talk about the rules. Someone has already defined what the rules are. We just have a look at that. This is a bit like that. Okay, what is a reference obligation, reference price, and so on. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah? Now, the fourth one, the CSA, what does that look like? I think it's a lot better when I show you these samples, so at least you get an idea what we are dealing with. So here is an example of a CSA. So like I said, this document is not compulsory, but nowadays most people, they will sign it. And here is an example between Barclays and Brass Number 1 PLC. I don't know who they are. Okay. And the most important parameters, the printing is not that good. Hold on a second. So these are the actual details, and this one's a bit hard to read. Let me try and find, I think I have another copy. Standard CSA. Okay, this one's easier to read. This one is not filled in, but it's actually the same document, but it's a template. So you just put here JP Morgan, and then on the other side you will put GE Capital. Like I said, the most important parameters, I mean, you can spend a whole month just reading this thing and trying to understand it, but I pick out the really key elements, which are here. Now, there is a threshold for JP Morgan and for GE Capital. There's a minimum transfer amount. There's also another thing called the independent amount, which I'll tell you now what that is. This is an initial deposit that you might place with the other party. So maybe you give them $1 million before you even start trading at all. Give them $1 an upfront deposit. But threshold you now know very well, and minimum transfer you know very well. Now let me say a few things on this. So number one, as you can see, because there are two lines, so these numbers don't have to be the same. They do not. Sometimes they are the same. They don't have to be the same. So this can be, 200,000. This can be 150,000, whatever. There is nothing to say that these CSAs need to be completely symmetric. If they are, I should tell you that in a case like this, if the mark-to-market starts swinging back up the other way, so GE is winning and winning lots and lots of money in their trades, and if the market recovers and they are now above the threshold of $1 million, so technically JP Morgan will be the one paying GE if things are completely symmetric. But my point to you just now is they don't have to be symmetric. And you can put any number here that you want as long as the other party agrees with it. So these things, you can imagine, really is a matter of negotiation between two parties. And it is a function of their bargaining, their relative bargaining power, how the negotiation will turn out. Now, I want to say two more things on this, and I want you to think about it. Number one, what do you think is a one-way CSA? So what we have talked about so far, it looks like that things are kind of symmetric between two parties of equal financial strength, credit quality. Have you ever heard of a thing called one-way CSA? What do you think that is? Very good. See, I ask this question every time, and every time someone is able to answer it, which is really good. The one-way CSA is, okay, let me take one step back. So I am JP Morgan, so I'm a big bank. And you are Johnny's Pizza down the road. Okay? You are a small company. I'm a big bank. So what do? I can push you around if I want to. Or I don't, or in the negotiation, the two parties are of not equal bargaining power because you need me a lot more than I need you, for example. So we sign a one-way CSA so that, as you said, if you are losing, you pay me. If I'm losing, I don't pay you. Now maybe you think, well, that's so unfair. Okay? It's got nothing to do with me. It's just, how much or how strong are you as a bargaining party? You know what is the funny thing? The funny thing is, so a big bank facing a small client. So the small client wants to play with the big bank, and the big bank would do that to the small client. So the big bank turns around, and let's say they go to someone like SAFE, or PBOC, or Bank of Japan, or the Monetary Authority of Singapore. You know what I'm getting at, right? The central banks. Now, central banks don't have a problem playing with big banks. It's more like the other way around. So when someone like JP Morgan goes to visit SAFE or PBOC,
So JP Morgan will probably say to PBOC, okay, we would like to sign this deal with you. And PBOC will say, yeah, okay, fine. But we also would like to sign a CSA. So JP Morgan will say, yeah, not a problem. We normally would do that with all our clients. And then PBOC might say, yeah, but we want to sign a one-way CSA. And JP Morgan will say, yeah, no problem, we do that too with all our clients. And PBOC will say, no, but that's a one-way CSA against you. And I know for a fact that it does happen. I have friends who work with big banks, and I'm talking big banks. They think they are good banks. They think they're wonderful. But in front of a central bank, you cannot fight the central bank. So they need the central banks more than the central banks need them in a way. So that actually, that can apply. So they get a taste of their own medicine in a way. Now that's the first thing I want to, are you guys, you know what I'm saying? Yeah? Now, second thing I want to talk about is, let's suppose you are JP Morgan and you are faced with a really small company, Johnny's Pizza down the road, and they really want to be your customer. For you okay to have them as a customer, but you want to have a CSA with maximum protection or maximum security or maximum protection. Now I ask you, if you are JP Morgan, so JP Morgan is party A, Johnny's Pizza is party B, what numbers are you going to put in here, and here, and here, and here? I'll start you off. So if I am JP Morgan, I don't even want to pay any collateral at all. So I'm going to put, let's say, $500 million. So it will be a big number before I have to pay anything at all. And because Johnny's Pizza is such a small company, it will never get it, for instance. And maybe minimum transfer amount, I don't know, 400. I basically have no intention of paying them, for example. What numbers are you going to put down here? No, threshold for the other guy. No, this one, 400. What numbers are you going to put here and here? For Johnny's Pizza. Sorry? 0. In fact, 0 is precisely correct. 0. What about here? Minimum transfer amount. Well, put 1, okay? Just be generous. So 0 threshold, $1 minimum is probably the maximum protection you can get. That just means immediately they have to pay you. And while you're at that, why not throw in an independent amount? So they have to put down $10 million to start with before you even play with them. And for you, 0. Right? So you can see how you can play this to your advantage. Thank you. Now that is a CSA. And then the fifth element, the actual confirmation. Now I'll show you an example of that. This is a swap, a cross-currency interest rate swap confirmation. Can you read that?
Why not? No, I'm just kidding you. Of course you can't read that. Now you can read it. Okay? And this is a real trade between the Bank of Nova Scotia and a company called Arcos Dorados BV. And it is actually a cross-currency interest rate swap. Don't worry about that. Between Brazilian real and US dollars. So 119 million Brazilian real and 50 million US dollars. Here, 50 million. And the US dollar is based on 3-month LIBOR. Brazilian real is based on a fixed rate of 12.1%. So it's got all these terms like, day count basis, actual 360, floating payment and compounding, business days, business centers, New York, Sao Paulo, and London. The important thing is read the bit on top. So this confirmation constitutes a confirmation. That's how lawyers talk. This confirmation constitutes a confirmation as referred to as supplements form part of and subject to the master agreement dated as of December 2008 between the Bank of Nova Scotia and Arcos Dorados BV. Now, I'll tell you what that means. So the way this whole thing hangs together is that every time you do a deal, so I told you there are 5 elements. So there's the master agreement. There's a schedule to the master agreement. There are ISDA definitions. There is a CSA, which is optional. And then this confirmation will refer to the agreement that is signed. And this will refer to, I guess, the CSA. But anyway, so so that means next time, so this time you are doing an IRS. Next time you might be doing an FX option. And then that FX option will have another confirmation, and it will again refer to this bunch of documents. And then after that, maybe you have, an oil forward contract. So that will again have a confirmation with just the standard terms for that trade, and it will again refer to this master agreement, which you only need to negotiate one time. One time, that's it. One time, and once your lawyer and their lawyer or your chief risk officer or your VP in finance, once they sign it off, then you don't have to renegotiate again. And then in your actual confirmation, you just refer to it. You refer to the master agreement that was in past tense, that was signed. So this is related to that. Is everyone okay? Yeah? Yeah, sure. Okay, so she asked a good question, which was never asked in other classes. She's asking, can individual persons or individual funds actually sign ISDA agreements? I don't think an individual person can sign an ISDA, but if you are very, very wealthy, if you are a billionaire, you would probably, you would have set up a company, and your company can sign the ISDA with a bank. You would never sign it personally, because if you sign personally, then you are assuming personal liability. So that's something that you wouldn't do. But for the second part of the question, can a fund sign an ISDA, which is an excellent question. No one else thought of this point. A fund can. A hedge fund can. In fact, you know, the way I say it's a good question because, in fact, if you were to look deeper into this, and I never mentioned this in the other classes, if you are JP Morgan and the way you negotiate an ISDA with someone like GE Capital is quite different, JPM, is quite different from how you would negotiate an ISDA contract with, let's say, BlackRock. The reason is that they are quite different businesses. So GE is easy to understand. It's just a corporation. They are a business. They are there. They build aircrafts. They build engines. They build this. They build that. They are a business. You can see it. Now, a fund. So first of all, a fund can be risky. Second thing, a fund, at least technically, can disappear overnight. And it's not because they went bankrupt, it's because their AUM drops to zero. If you are a fund, the moment all your clients leave and walk out the door, that's the end of your fund, right? That normally would not happen to a corporation. So the strategies you need to negotiate ISDAs with a fund are actually quite different. And I'm glad you raised that point because I didn't really mention it in the previous tutorials. Are you with me? You understand? Yeah. Okay. Was there another question? Yeah. Yes, correct. So you still sign the same documents, which are these documents. So you still sign the master, you still sign the schedule, you still agree on CSA, on the definitions, but you will now likely be dealing other derivatives depending on what kind of fund you are dealing with. That comes into play if you are signing, let's say BlackRock. Now, BlackRock is a company, but under that company, there can be a lot of different funds. There can be a U.S. equity fund. There can be an emerging market bond fund. Let's just say, okay. There can be an emerging market, large cap equity fund. So each of these potentially can sign an ISDA with JP Morgan. Now the ISDA will have all these elements like the master, number one, and then schedule to the master, and 3, the definitions, and 4, the CSA. And then when you start doing trades, and as you said, Chloe, these might be equity trades, fine. Then you're going to have, equity swaps or equity derivative down here. So the CSA will come into play directly versus this fund here. Okay. Now, sometimes there are so many different ways you can play it. So sometimes there are these so-called umbrella funds or balance funds. What is a balance fund? A balance fund is a fund which has a bit of equity in it and a bit of fixed income, maybe a bit of cash. So within that fund, you may have there's a sub-fund. It's like Lego, So there can be an equity fund here, which is going to be run by an equity manager. So maybe there's $1 billion, and then maybe 600 million is in the equity. And then maybe 300 million is in bonds. Let's just say so fixed income. So this is the fixed income. And this is the cash. So this is the money market fund. Cash, 100 million. So in this case, JP Morgan might end up signing an ISDA with these guys. So JP Morgan wouldn't know or wouldn't care about these. So this is that's why I said it's an umbrella fund. So you can, that is also possible. So there are lots of different ways, but whatever you do, if you are facing this umbrella fund, then your master agreement and your schedule to the master and your definitions and your CSA, they are all directed at the umbrella fund and not the ones below. Okay? It's like you divide your house into different rooms, but I don't care how you divide your house in. Okay, I'm just renting the whole place. So that is another possibility. What was I saying? Okay, so that's the deal confirmation. Now, I guess I want to go through now the third element. So I told you earlier that bankers get quite worried because of the individual mark-to-market swings. And even when you add them up and when you apply the netting, they still worry about the total number because that can be a huge number. So you fix that problem. You fix this problem with netting. You fix problem number 2 with CSA. Now I'm going to talk about problem number 3, which is what I call collateral damage. You're not going to find that in textbooks. It's just I'm describing it like this. Now, what do I mean collateral damage? Now, in military circles, the term collateral damage, it has some meaning. So if you are at war with somebody and these are houses and you send around your fighter aircrafts and you start bombing one of the houses, and then the house next door has some damage, that's collateral damage. And another way to think of it is, think of it like a family. So you lend some money to your best friend, and they need some money, so you lend them money to help them out. Now, this best friend has a brother and a sister. Now, your best friend is a really good guy, but there's a brother in the family who is rather naughty, and that brother, he likes taking drugs or go to Macau, use a couple of $1 million over the weekend or something like that. So you lend the money to your friend, and then you raise the topic. Hey, I heard that in your family, if you have a brother who is a bit of a troublemaker. And I know I'm letting you some money, but I'm a little bit concerned. Now, your best friend is quite likely going to say, well, none of your business. As long as I am paying you, what are you worried about? You are worried because your brother can bring the whole family down. And I'm not kidding about that, because that was what happened 10 years ago, there's a company called AIA, which is a big insurance conglomerate. And within AIA, there are a lot of units. And there is one called AIG FP. This is a business, AIG Financial Products. Now, they nearly went bankrupt. In fact, they did. They went bust. And they practically pulled the whole company, the whole corporation down. And the US government had to come in and actually bail them out with around $180 billion. That's a lot of money. So one company is capable of sometimes bringing down the entire organization. Let me go back to this organization chart here. And now you imagine if you are JP Morgan, and typically you will negotiate your ISDA with GE Capital because they are the consolidated financial management unit. And they would trade all the derivatives on behalf of other, or they would trade most of the derivatives. Now, you imagine if you hear on the news that GE Oil and Gas has gone bankrupt. So you are sitting here with GE Capital and you're wondering, oh my God, GE Oil and Gas just went bankrupt. If you are JP Morgan, what you would like to do is you look at all the transactions that you have with GE Capital. You look at all the mark-to-markets. You calculate one total number, and either you pay them or they pay you. And you just terminate the relationship. Say goodbye and see you later. That's what you would like. Actually, you can't. You can't because, like I said, you are stuck with the other counterparty until the transaction is finished. As long as they are making all their payments, they are paying premium, they are paying coupon, you can't do that, okay? And this is when things get quite interesting. Now, I will show you, and this relates to the schedule. And I already told you that in the schedule, there are 5 sections, and I want to talk about this one mostly, and maybe a little bit this one and a little bit this one. Now, the termination events will solve that problem that I just described. What problem? The problem that you are dealing with GE Capital and there is a fire somewhere else in another room, and then these guys are telling you, look, it's none of your business, we are dealing with it, and you are getting so nervous. So when you are negotiating an ISDA, the first section of the schedule will actually help you, called termination events. Now, let me show you an example of that. So here's an ISDA schedule, and near the beginning, I'm going to go to the top. So this is a schedule to the master agreement, and very near the beginning. So you cross this out and you put JP Morgan, you cross this out, you put GE Capital. And for specified entity, you put down GE, oil and gas. As a specified entity, and you put down GE aviation. You can put down GE energy management. Now, if the other company has 400 subsidiaries, you can put them all down if you want to. It's not limited to 4. What this will do is, if something ever happens to one of these companies, if they default or if they go bankrupt, now they cannot say to you, it's not your business. They can't do that because specified entity means if something bad happens to these companies, I'm just going to stop my relationship with you. That's why I keep talking about the prenup. I'm so sorry. I'm going to stop the relationship. So let's calculate all the markets, add them all up, see what the number is. Either I pay you or you pay me, and I'll see you later. That's what specified entity means. Now, so like I said, if you are JP Morgan, you want to put them all down, all of them. But if you are GE, you probably don't want to. So what you want is not what I want. So GE might say, look, I don't really want to put this down here. What is bothering you about GE energy management? And JP Morgan can say, well, I heard that GE energy management has a big construction project in Saudi Arabia, and we are worried about that transaction. It seems quite risky, and if there is a default, I am quite concerned. So GE might say, all right, as a compromise, you cross that off, and then down here in specified transaction, you just put that down. So GE energy management, you know, $50 billion oil contract with Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, whatever, okay? I'm just making an example of Saudi Arabia. So now, instead of having the company here at a corporate level, it is now reduced to a transaction level. Are you with me? So this is not here anymore, and they would put this under this heading. And they might say, okay, what is worrying you about GE Aviation? What is your concern? And JP Morgan might say, well, you know, GE Aviation has a $2 billion global bond, and we are quite nervous that they might default on this bond. And if GE is strong enough as a bargaining party, they will say, okay, why don't you remove that? And then down here, under specified indebtedness, you put that down. So GE Aviation, $2 billion global bond. And here you cross it out. So if something bad ever happens to this bond, if they ever default on this bond, then JP Morgan can say, all right, I'm out, and I want to terminate my banker customer relationship with you, and let's calculate a mark-to-market, and then we just say goodbye there. Okay, so I've already talked to you about three very important specifications: specified entity, specified transactions, and specified indebtedness. Now, when you look at it, you don't really need to remember these things. All we are doing is we are connecting. So if you are JP Morgan facing GE Capital, we are connecting what is happening elsewhere in the firm. We are dragging them into the picture. So either the entire entity, or maybe some transaction that they are doing, or maybe some bonds that they have issued. So now these will become part of an agreement. This is trying to solve exactly the problem that normal contract law cannot help. Because, you know, corporate finance is so complicated. You can't just, it's not like just you dealing with your landlord. It's not that simple. Is everyone okay with that? Now, if you are, I'll tell you a couple more things. The first one is the idea of cross default. Have you ever heard of this term? Now, I would argue that if ever you want to be a fund manager, or you want to be a risk manager, or you want to be a corporate banker, cross default is the most heavily negotiated item between a bank and a client. Does anyone know what cross default is? Now, cross default is this. I had a diagram somewhere. Let me just try and find that. Here you go. Now, imagine this situation where GE, our old friend, has a 5-year loan with Bank of China of $100 million, and they have a $500 million 3-year loan with HSBC, and with JP Morgan, they have a $200 million 5-year loan, and they have 135 derivative transactions. Now, cross default, first of all, is an option. I shouldn't say option. It is a contract clause which has a binary. It's either yes or no. It's either applicable or not applicable. Applicable means yes, not applicable means no. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is cross default is something that you would negotiate for individual bonds, individual bank loans, and also in ISDA contracts. So you can see how important that is. Next time, if you are a fund manager and you are thinking to buy a particular bond, the first item you would look at probably is whether cross default is applicable or not. Now, let me tell you what cross default means. So here, GE has banking relationships with 3 parties: BOC, HSBC, and JP Morgan. So for the BOC loan is $100 million for 5 years. Now, let's say for them, cross default applicable or cross default is yes. But for them, it doesn't matter. And then for HSBC, when they negotiated, they said cross default not applicable or cross default no. And then for JP Morgan, they said cross default applicable. So HSBC is the only party which has negotiated different terms. So now imagine one day you wake up and GE has defaulted on BOC, and BOC only. So maybe they have to pay some interest and they haven't. Or principal, it doesn't matter, interest or principal. So they defaulted on a payment. My question to you is, what can BOC do? What can HSBC do? What can JP Morgan do? Now, I'll start you off. What can BOC do? Because BOC is the first victim. They're the one that GE defaulted on. So BOC, although it's a 5-year loan, so it's not due until 2024, BOC can actually pick up the phone, call GE and say to them, I'd like you to pay me back $100 million. And GE will say, oh yeah, well, when? BOC will say, today. Okay? No, because that's what loans are all about. You don't pay my interest, you pay me right away. Everything. Okay? Now, what can HSBC do if GE still keeps paying the coupons to HSBC? Very good, very good. That is exactly the answer, because they said cross default not applicable. Now, in the case of JP Morgan, it is different, because there it says cross default applicable, maybe for the loan, and then in addition, these will be separate negotiations. In that case, JP Morgan can pick up the phone and call GE, and he'll be very polite and say, oh, good morning. I heard that you recently defaulted on BOC. It will be in the news and in the newspaper and also on Bloomberg. GE said, well, yeah, well, it's true. That's what we did. And JP can say, well, can we ask you to pay us back the $200 million loan that we have with you? And we also want to terminate all the derivative transactions. So we calculate all the mark-to-markets, we add them all up, we get one number. Don't know what that number is, but someone will be paying the other party. And we like our money back. GE will say, yeah, when? Today, actually. That is the difference between having cross default applicable and not applicable. Now, you might wonder, why would HSBC agree with this? Well, there are two things I can think of. Number one is, if you really want to have their business, so don't forget, I'm now talking about HSBC. It could be a much smaller bank. It could be a really, really small bank, XYZ. And they want to have GE's business, and GE says, well, you're a small bank, and we don't really need you, but if you lend some money and you are happy to take this condition, then we will play with you, for example. So it's all about the relative bargaining power. The other thing, of course, is if you are a banker and you are lending money to people all over town, would you prefer to have cross default applicable or not applicable? In other words, is it actually good for your credit risk or is it not? It offers you some protection, doesn't it? cross default is a little bit like this. If cross default is applicable, it's like you walk into a village somewhere, you are a stranger, you don't know anyone, it's a very small village. And the first person you see, you offended her, you're very rude, so now she's offended. You offend one person, you offend the whole village. You know what I mean? Yeah, so cross default is anyone who has the cross default clause applicable, they can ring up the customer and ask them to repay. There was a famous case. You guys need to go somewhere, by the way. Okay, I'll finish quite soon. I want to share with you a couple more interesting things. There was a famous case a few years ago, a company called Kaiser. Have you heard of that before? And this was interesting. So Kaiser, I think they are a property developer. And this one almost kind of happened by accident. You know the story behind it. So they have a loan with HSBC and some other banks. And with those other banks, cross default was applicable. And they also have some loans with HSBC. Now, with the HSBC loans, there was a clause in there which says, I think if the CEO or the chairman, if that person ever resigns, if that person leaves the company, HSBC has the right to demand payment immediately. So I think the CEO, he did resign. This was Christmas, I think a few years ago. 4 or 5 years ago. So the CEO resigned, and I don't know if he was aware that it's going to trigger these consequences. So the CEO resigned, the HSBC picked up the phone, called Kaiser, excuse me, and you pay back the money we lend you because you triggered off the early repayment. And they don't have the money to pay HSBC. So they defaulted on HSBC, and they defaulted on these other banks as well, because those other banks also lent them money on a cross-default applicable basis. So I don't know what happened to the company. I think about that, because one guy resigned, perhaps by accident, without thinking, what consequences it caused. So it's actually an interesting case worth looking into. That's on cross default. Now, for the schedule, so like I said, there's a specified entity, specified transactions, specified indebtedness. The other clauses are not so interesting. So tax representation is just telling the other party what your tax status is. Are you a US company? Are you incorporated in the Cayman Islands? Are you from China or Hong Kong or whatever? Part 3, agreement to deliver documents. As you can see here, it is just two parties agreeing to give the other party some documents by a certain date. Now, I'll tell you why this is important. So JP Morgan and GE can say, all right, so we do all our financials by December 31st, and within 2 weeks, we will exchange our fully audited consolidated company financials with each other. So by January 14, you give me yours, I give you mine. If you are GE and if you are late, that can be interpreted as an act of default. Now, why is that so important? Because in the past, when companies are late providing the information, usually there's something seriously wrong. And the auditors refuse to sign off. And you get somebody else, your financials are in a mess. And I don't think I can sign off on it. So normally it is something that is quite serious. So if today is January 14, you are supposed to give me your numbers, you are a multi-billion-dollar company, it's not a joke. And you can't, then there might be something going wrong. Okay? So that's part 3. Part 4, just the addresses and what offices you are using. Now, governing law is worth talking about. Now, this agreement will be governed and construed in accordance with English law. I would say that of all the ISDAs that are negotiated globally, perhaps 80 to 85% are governed by either English law or New York law. Now, what does that mean? So, for example, if, let's say Cathay Pacific, it's a Hong Kong company, negotiates an ISDA with Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi, which is Japanese. Now, one is Hong Kong based, the other is Japanese. And so they negotiated this, they start trading derivatives. One day they got into a dispute and they decided to go to court. They will take the case and go to court in England and have their case heard in England by an English court. And then whatever that court decides, okay, you, Cathay Pacific, you're wrong. So you pay damage to Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi, they have to pay. So it's legally binding. Now, you might wonder, and I have heard this before from professionals, they are puzzled. Why is it that, a Hong Kong company dealing with a Japanese company, they go to a court in the UK, or they go to court in New York? There is a kind of, a nationalistic dimension to it. Now, I'll tell you why. When you specify the governing law is English law or New York law, it's not to be cool. Hey, New York. Okay? It's not for that reason. It is because they have, so English law and New York law together, they have a very, very rich tradition of commercial dispute resolution. So that if you are Cathay Pacific and you are dealing with the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi and there is a legal dispute, there is an argument between the two of you, you can look at all the cases in the last 200 years and your lawyers and their lawyers pretty much can predict what the likely outcome will be. Okay? And then you go to court and then you have a settle over that. That is the reason. For me, I don't feel strongly that, why don't we use Hong Kong law or this or that. For me, English law, you know what that is for me? It is a product. It's a good product. Use it. It's just like, if you play soccer, so I don't know who invented the rules, but they're good rules and they're quite reasonable. So I use those rules. I don't care where it came from. That's the law. Okay? and netting. The other things they're not really important. Okay, so I think you are now. Oh, and then you sign here, and the other guy signs there. Okay, that's about it. And I now consider all of you guys is the experts. Okay, and I want to thank you for listening to me. Now let me just sum up by just very quickly. So today we discussed. So we had a bit of housekeeping at the start. So you know what you need to do tomorrow, and you know what you need to do in the next tutorial. We're going to have a little quiz covering these areas. And then today we looked at ISDA in a bit more detail. I told you that there are three things that bankers might worry about. These two we already talked about last time. So today is mostly about how you deal with, the collateral, the potential collateral damage. And you will deal with that by going to your ISDA schedule, ISDA schedule, item number 2, where there are 5 sections, and the first one tells you when you actually can terminate a relationship. It's a little bit like, if you remember, and I'm sorry I keep bringing up this example, but it just makes it easier for people to understand. So you remember I told you about the prenups. Do you remember that? And there were some examples. One of them was, okay, Keith Urban is a singer. I don't know about his music. And Nicole Kidman is an Australian actress. So after Kidman's advisors, she has personal advisors, insists she gets a prenup. She and Keith agree that he would earn $640,000 every year. However, since he was once addicted to cocaine, the prenup says if he ever uses any illegal drugs, he won't get any of his earnings, and probably she will divorce him. Okay. So that's an example. You do something bad, I walk. Okay. So the ISDA is kind of a little bit like that. All right. Yeah. A default no, is any default. Yeah. Now I tell you what default means. Default can mean you don't pay coupons when you are supposed to. Default can mean you don't pay principal to somebody else when you are supposed to. Default can even mean when you are supposed to deliver documents to somebody else and you are not doing so. So as long as you offend that guy, and when you negotiate with me, cross default. That's what cross means, cross default. So you default on them, you default on me. Then I would consider that you have default. One last and important point. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Does the other two have the right to action?
Okay, good question. Now, if they defaulted not on BOC, so first of all, you default on someone, that somebody, you default on me, I can demand payments right away. So HSBC now, they will have a right to pick up the phone and say, pay me my money. As for BOC or JP Morgan or bank A, B, C, D, E, F, G, what they can do would depend on what they negotiated with GE with their borrowing contracts. So in this case, I did say that GE negotiated with BOC cross default applicable. So yes, BOC now can pick up the phone and say, hey, I heard you defaulted on BOC, on HSBC. So now that means you also defaulted on me. So I'd like to have my $100 million back, please. They can do that.
Oh, so it's not, so even if HSBC doesn't have the simple with the other companies still can.
Correct. Cross default is what you can do when your client defaults on someone else. But if your client defaults on you, of course you have the right to take some action. Okay. But cross default is when you think about it, like even at a personal level, you have 3 apartments. One day you will have 3 apartments. And that day is not far away. So one apartment you borrow from HSBC, another apartment you borrow from Standard Chartered, and one more you borrow from Hang Seng Bank. Now, if you default on Hang Seng Bank, but you are still paying interest on Standard Chartered and HSBC, why should those guys disturb you? Because if they demand their payments and you can't pay, they basically just kill the client, and then you just go bankrupt. So as long as you can pay your coupons, sometimes maybe they should not push you. So cross default is what you can do when your customer defaults on somebody else. Okay. There was one more thing I wanted to say. I forgot. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go on.
Does it mean if you have a applicable cross-default terms in your funding covenant, does it mean you are more exposed to the default because the company might consider default on you first when it comes?
Why do you think they will consider defaulting on you first?
Because if they default on other guys do not have the
Yeah.
you still default on both.
Yeah.
You have the cross default. But if he only defaults on you, not to pay other guys.
Okay, I see what you mean. So you are thinking that if a client has 10 banking relationships and with you, so cross default is yes, but with all the other people, cross default is no, then they might default on you first without triggering the other ones. Yeah, I guess that's possible. But I think that would be a very unusual situation. I tell you, you can turn it around and look at it another way, which is to say that bankers typically would want to have cross default applicable, and they would only cross that out and say cross default not applicable if they really want to have your business, or if they think you are such a super credit, such a strong client that they are happy to take that risk. But normally they would want to have cross default protection. I would say one more thing. I keep saying that. Okay. be very clear that there is a difference between default and bankruptcy. And we discussed this earlier today. Now, default is, and I'm sorry to be medical about this, but default is kind of like having a heart attack. You're not dead yet, but you run the risk of dying. But bankruptcy is when you're actually dead, you're done. Okay, so people are going to come and cut you up into pieces. So when you default, it is not completely hopeless, because somebody might come and bail you out or make a cash injection, help you for whatever reason. Default is bad, but default and bankruptcies are quite different corporate circumstances. Is everyone okay with that? Okay. Bankruptcy is another status. When you declare bankrupt, you're gone. That's it. Okay? Yes. Sure.
In practice, how can BOC know this company, GE, default HSBC? Because I don't think both parties have the incentive to tell BOC that GE has defaulted.
You find out, in fact, it's a good question, because within ISTA, there is a definition of available public information. So that information has to be in the public. Now, first of all, if it's a bond, let's say bond, okay, then there is no secret, because bond has investors everywhere. With a loan, technically, you are right, but I find it unthinkable that something as serious as a corporate default can be kept in secret. You don't have to look far. Look at what I just showed you, not this one. This case. Now, this was in the South China Morning Post. So this was reported. So you can't keep a secret. It's not really possible. So sooner or later, somebody will talk, and you see, Kaiser Group Holdings has defaulted on a loan. This is a loan. I think what you see, the second paragraph is your answer. In an announcement last night, the Hong Kong listed firm, which has been blocked by the federal government from selling flats at 4 projects, said it had defaulted on Hong Kong $400 million loan from HSBC. So they voluntarily made that announcement. You can't keep things like that under the wrap, because what if you try to keep it secret because you want to sell some flats, and then you find out later on that you don't have enough money to complete the project? And people will say, oh, what happened? Oh, I'm sorry, well, 4 weeks ago I defaulted on HSBC. Why didn't you say so? You get into even bigger trouble. So I don't think it's really an idea that you want to keep it secret. Okay? But that's a good question. You see, other banks are likely to call in their loans. That means ask for early repayment. Otherwise, there may be nothing left in the company for them. So this was a pretty famous, it was a high-profile cross-default case. Here you go. Have you heard of this company? So December last year, the company had Kwok resigned as chairman and executive director at the end of the year for health reasons. But rumors persist of him being investigated, even after the firm denied. If there is a change of management, it can trigger a covenant where the bank has the right to ask for immediate repayment. And HSBC did that. And other people knew. So they'll be watching, okay, can they pay or can they not? And it turns out they can't pay. When all eyes are on you, I don't think you can hide something like that. They do. She said, I think banks will transfer information. The loan market is quite funny. The loan market is not like the bond market. The loan market is a much closer sort of community. So all the big banks, they all know each other. And HSBC might tip off Standard Chartered. Now, why would they do that? Because next time Standard Chartered might tip off HSBC. So they work. There is a measure of cooperation between them. Okay, I've kept you long enough. I better let you go. But thank you for listening to me. And I will put this. I'll produce a video and I'll put this online for everybody. Thank you, guys.